Mystery of the Middle Ages, mass grave. Discovered in city centre. London, 2013. Construction workers are laying the Elizabeth line. An excavator strikes a mass grave. The bucket pulls up dozens of bones that look human. Work is immediately halted, and city officials, police, and forensic experts arrive at the scene. Soon, the first expert assessments leak to the press. Thousands of human remains are buried in one massive grave on this site. But how could a mass grave like its contents end up in the heart of London? News of this discovery caused both sensation and shock. Archaeologists from the Museum of London Archaeology join the investigation. Radiocarbon dating of the remains confirms the grave belongs to victims of the Great Plague of 1348. J. Carver, a lead archaeologist for the Crossrail project, noted, "The construction of the Elizabeth line gives us a rare opportunity to study previously inaccessible areas of London and learn more about how citizens lived in the 14th and 15th centuries." Scientists begin to examine the burial site meticulously, striving not to miss a single detail. What can this 700-year-old grave tell us? We're used to thinking of the Middle Ages as a dark period of ignorance and decline that followed antiquity. But was the Middle Ages really as we imagine it? Let's find out together. Chapter 1. It all started with the Romans. London's history begins in 43 AD, when the Romans established their first settlement here, Londinium. Why did they choose this specific location? London is ideally situated near the mouth of the Thames. The river served as a natural highway, extending deep into the island and out to sea. The Romans brought everything they considered the foundation of civilization. They built stone walls, administrative buildings, temples, an amphitheatre, and public baths. They built the first paved roads in Britain, connecting Londinium with other key settlements. In its prime, the city had a population of 45,000 to 60,000 people, a massive metropolis by ancient standards. The Roman structures were so solid that, nearly 2,000 years later, the Roman legacy is still tangible today. Fragments of the ancient walls can be seen in the very heart of the city, and many modern streets follow the routes of Roman roads. Everything changed drastically in the early 5th century. The Roman Empire was in deep crisis, and in 410 AD, by order of the emperor, the last legions left Britain forever. Could Londinium have survived without their protection? Absolutely not. The city rapidly emptied. Fleeing from destructive raids, the residents abandoned the once great metropolis, and it began to crumble. For centuries, it lay derelict. But in the 6th century, the Saxons favoured this stretch of the Thames and established a new town nearby, Lundenwic. King Alfred the Great finally revived the old Londinium, seemingly a ghost city forever, in the 9th century. He rebuilt it and named it Londonburh. However, London had no peaceful or happy life in the 9th century. The city, barely revived by King Alfred, became a prime target for the Vikings. They attacked it in 842, 851, and 871. The Vikings set fire to the city, looted it, and killed or captured thousands of its residents. The city appeared depleted, lacking the strength to resurrect its former splendor. After these devastating raids, London, although it continued to exist, was under constant threat. To protect it, King Alfred the Great ordered its walls to be strengthened and the Roman fortifications restored. Because of such measures in the early 10th century, London was able to withstand further Viking attacks. But the siege was not the end. The Danes, led by King Sweyn Forkbeard, captured London in 1013. They rebuilt the city walls and widened the moat, striving to secure their hold on the Thames. However, their rule was short-lived, and soon London returned to Anglo-Saxon control. These constant wars and transfers of power only fortified the city, turning it into an impregnable fortress and a centre of political struggle. In the 11th century, King Edward the Confessor moved his residence to the western suburb on Thorney Island, the future Westminster. Here, he rebuilt the abbey that the Danes had destroyed, turning it into the spiritual heart of England, and built a new palace, a symbol of the permanence of royal power. From this moment, London was divided into two parts, the city of commoners, and Westminster, the king's residence. 1066. London, at the centre of a new historical drama. In 1066, London became the stage for a new historical drama. King Edward the Confessor died, leaving no direct heir. Fearing the weakening of the country, the clergy elected a new king. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl at the time. This choice angered the Norman Duke, William, who would go down in history as William the Conqueror. A desperate struggle for the English throne erupted between the Anglo-Saxon army of King Harold and the Normans. King Harold Godwinson, a descendant of the Germanic tribes who settled in Britain after the Romans left and founded their own kingdoms, considered himself the rightful master of these lands and was ready to fight for the crown until the end. His rival, the Duke of Normandy, was a direct descendant of the Vikings. He had the warlike spirit of his ancestors and ambitions worthy of a king. Believing his dynastic ties gave him a claim to the English throne, he decided that the question of who would rule England should be settled not in the royal court's back rooms, but on the battlefield. At Hastings, William emerged victorious, leading to the death of King Harold Godwinson. With great pomp and the ringing of bells, William was crowned in Westminster Abbey. Instead of plundering the conquered city, he acted with surprising leniency. He preserved its privileges, confirmed its city freedoms, and excluded London from the Domesday Book census. However, to keep the residents in check, he built the Tower and new fortifications along the Thames. Thus, the struggle between two strong personalities ushered in a new era for both England and London itself. In 1189, the city gained the position of an elected mayor. This was almost unheard of in the Middle Ages. Municipal self-governance. At the turn of the 12th, 13th centuries, the royal treasury was moved from the ancient capital of Winchester to Westminster, and from that moment on, London finally became the heart of England. Why did London, and not another city, achieve such a position? The key lies in its exceptionally advantageous location on the Thames. London was the main gateway to Europe. Chapter 2. London, the city that couldn't be destroyed. London's status as a free city made it a true magnet for people, attracting artisans, merchants, and runaway serfs. But with prosperity came problems: chaotic population growth, overcrowding, and terrible sanitation. Prosperity overwhelmed the city, causing terrifying diseases to spread in its narrow, filthy streets. In 1348, the Black Death struck London. In just a few years, the terrible disease wiped out half the population. It seemed the city was on the brink of extinction, but the plague receded, and by 1380, London was buzzing with life again, its population once more nearing 100,000. However, the turmoil didn't end there. In 1381, the Great Peasants' Revolt erupted, led by Wat Tyler. The enraged peasants stormed the capital, looting streets, setting fire to houses, and delivering mob justice on officials. After such devastating blows, one might have assumed that the city was doomed. But London, like a phoenix, rose from the ashes, becoming even richer and more influential. You would think that history would have taught people a lesson in caution, but the 17th century brought new calamities. In 1665, the Great Plague claimed the lives of 60,000 people. And just a year later, in 1666, the Great Fire destroyed most of the city, turning more than half the houses and almost all the churches into ash. And yet, London survived again and did not perish. Why did London rise from the ruins again and again? Why did people, despite the high cost of living, cramped conditions, and horrific hardships, continue to flock here? The answer lies in a remarkable feature of medieval London, something that made it unlike any other city in Europe. We'll talk about that in more detail. Chapter 3. The Citizens of London. Who came and why? So, why did thousands of new residents and money from all over the country flow into London, despite all its troubles? The answer lies in a complex hierarchy and unique living conditions. Security. Thanks to royal authority and the army, London became a well-fortified city, no longer troubled by small bands of raiders. The lives of its citizens were, without a doubt, safer than in the countryside. But this security came at a price. Rent for an artisan's home was about 240 pence per year, which is equivalent to £2,000 to £2,500 today. For the poor, housing cost 60 pence, or about £500 to £600. The power of law. London was home to the two largest courts, the criminal and the royal. People flocked here to seek protection from landlords or to resolve disputes over inheritance or business. The most dangerous criminals were sentenced in criminal court and met their end on the scaffold in the Tower. The numerous class of judges and lawyers was considered especially privileged, influential, and wealthy. The power of the Church. Before the Church Reformation of Henry VIII, London was a Catholic city. The numerous clergy possessed sacred secrets, political connections, and the patronage of both the Pope and the Crown. The Order of the Knights Templar, the poor fellow soldiers of Christ, and of the Temple of Solomon, also had a strong presence in the city. They held immense influence as the main guides for Christians to the Holy Land. From the 12th century, they were the most powerful force in Europe. Their London palace stored untold treasures and relics. However, French King Philip IV destroyed the order in France and then in England in the early 14th century. Economic drivers. The city's life revolved around trade. The Merchants' Guild, which owned warehouses, ships, and crews of sailors, controlled the port. They traded across Europe and transported pilgrims to the Holy Land. But London's true fame came from its bankers and moneylenders. Their capital made the city a financial centre, enmeshing it in a web of contracts and mortgages. Even royalty borrowed money from them. The backbone of the city's industry was its artisans, weavers, armourers, shoemakers, and bakers. The guilds strictly regulated prices, quality, and the training of apprentices. The average artisan earned about 4 pence a day, which is equivalent to £30 to £35 today. An unskilled labourer earned about 2 pence a day, or roughly £15 to £20. The city also attracted the poor, wage labourers, petty traders, and runaway serfs. They fled their feudal lords. London law granted freedom to a serf who lived in the city for a year and 1 day. City air makes a man free, they would say. This social status, being a citizen or burgher, was considered more prestigious than being a simple peasant. It provided opportunities to engage in municipal self-government, operate a business, and obtain legal protection, thereby enhancing the predictability and stability of life. Finally, London was home to representatives of the oldest profession. The Crown and the Church did not prohibit prostitution, viewing it as a necessary part of society. These women lived outside the city walls, wore special clothing, a cloak with a striped hood, and served their clients only in specific locations. The average cost of a service was 1 to 2 pence, £7 to £10 today. Contrary to expectations, society did not treat them with contempt. The courtesans knew the city's life better than anyone else. They spread news and, unfortunately, diseases. Thus, London was not just a city. It was a magnet that promised freedom, security, and the chance to climb the social ladder. Chapter 4. Daily Life. Filth and Ale. Life in medieval London was full of contrasts, and this was especially evident in daily life. How did the citizens eat? Their diet depended on their wealth. The poor mainly ate bread and porridge. Fruits and vegetables were costly, especially in winter, and they could only afford meat and fish on holidays. But ale was accessible to almost everyone. It cost just half a penny per mug, about £1 to £1.50 today, and was a part of their daily diet. Unlike imported wine, which only the rich could afford, ale was the people's drink. It was not akin to contemporary beer. It was opaque, had a short shelf life, and possessed a tart flavour. The church condemned drunkenness, but it couldn't forbid the consumption of ale. Why? Not everyone had access to clean drinking water. Water was often pricier than ale, which made ale the safest and most accessible drink. Was London as dirty as we see in the movies? Both yes and no. In the narrow streets where the poor lived, there was no sewage system, and waste was thrown out of windows. This, naturally, led to epidemics. However, wealthy areas were much cleaner, with servants constantly cleaning the streets and homes. Living in London was costly. Rent for a small artisan's apartment could reach 240 pence a year, about £2,000 to £2,500 today, while homes for the poor cost 60 pence, about £500 to £600. Most residents rented their homes, giving up a large portion of their earnings for a roof over their heads, which was a necessity in the London climate, especially for the thousands of runaway serfs constantly arriving in the city. What about amenities? There were almost none. Water was drawn from wells, and toilets, if they existed, were in the backyard. The Roman legacy of public baths partially compensated for these shortcomings. London's baths were not just places for washing, they were centres of socialising and recreation. There, one could wash, do laundry, receive a haircut, see a doctor, and even meet women of ill repute. The baths were co-ed for men and women. Nudity was not considered indecent in the Middle Ages. The concept of personal privacy, as we know it today, was completely absent in cramped homes where entire families crowded into one room. That's why people of all ages and social classes felt free in the baths. Chapter 5. Medieval London Entertainment. From pubs to street artist. How did the medieval city entertain itself? Aside from daily work and chores, citizens had a vibrant cultural life centered around pubs. Pubs, then called alehouses, first appeared during Roman times as inns. After the legions left, the tradition remained. In 965, King Edgar even issued a decree that a village could not have more than one pub. But in a city as large as London, there were hundreds. In pubs, people didn't just eat, they socialized. It was a place for heated debates, sealing deals, and discussing the latest news. Social barriers dissolved there. Soldiers, judges, artisans, merchants, and even prostitutes could sit at the same table. A mug of ale cost just half a penny, making it accessible to almost everyone. An intriguing fact: the first pub owners were often women. To attract customers and signal that fresh ale was ready, the proprietress would hang a bundle of green branches on a pole outside the entrance. Another passion of the citizens was travelling performers. Before the advent of regular theatres, they entertained the public with comedies and farces. Although they belonged to the lowest social class, they were welcome guests in the city squares. The artists would mock the authorities, satirize societal vices, and poke fun at clerical arrogance, all while spreading news and telling stories from the past. Without them, life in the city would have been dull and colourless. Now, let's talk about intimate life. The Catholic Church kept it under close scrutiny. Marriage was considered a sacred union intended for procreation. Divorce was practically impossible. But London's archives contain records of some fascinating cases. For instance, a woman staged a divorce case, accusing her husband of impotence. The court conducted an examination, inviting nude models to try to arouse the defendant. Their efforts were unsuccessful, and the divorce was mercifully granted. The Church strongly recommended that spouses use only the missionary position and even engage in intimacy while partially clothed, as nudity was considered a sin of lust. Thus, medieval London was a city of stark contrasts: noisy, crowded pubs and cheerful street artists coexisting with the strict rules of the Catholic Church. All those events shaped a unique rhythm of life, making the city at once dangerous, fun, and alive. Chapter 6. A Forgotten Story, Retold. Now let's return to the beginning of our story. During the construction of the Elizabeth Line, formerly known as Crossrail, in London in 2013, some of the most significant archaeological discoveries in UK history were made. Archaeologists found thousands of artifacts spanning 8,000 years of history. From flint tools used by the first settlers and woolly mammoth bones to Roman roads and Victorian pots. In the Charterhouse Square area, archaeologists discovered a cemetery containing the victims of the Great Plague of 1348. DNA analysis confirmed the presence of the plague bacteria, and radiocarbon dating precisely pinpointed the burial period. But one skeleton, designated number 1231, told a story that perfectly illustrates what life and death meant in those tumultuous times. The skeleton belonged to a young man who died between 1350 and 1351, right after the plague's peak in London in 1348. Isotope analysis of his teeth and bones provided fascinating details. He grew up in the north of England, not in London, and moved to the city just a few years before his death. Damage to his spine indicated he was a labourer who carried heavy loads or worked in agriculture. His body, like many others, was thrown face down into a mass grave without a coffin or a shroud, testifying to the catastrophic scale of the tragedy and the complete lack of respect for the dead. So what brought this young man to London? The search for freedom and opportunity was a significant motivation. Like thousands of other runaway serfs, he came to the city hoping to gain the freedom promised by urban law. A year and a day of living in London would make him a free man. With no documents, he likely entered the city with a merchant's caravan, paying the guards a small bribe. Life was hard at first, working 12 to 14 hours a day, sleeping in a basement or the port, and earning a meager wage. But gradually, life improved. He made acquaintances in pubs and connections with prostitutes who were a source of news and useful contacts. These small victories were a giant step toward a new, free life. And although the plague ultimately claimed him, he died a free citizen of a free city. The history of London is not just one of calamities, but of incredible resilience. The city burned in 1666, but rose from the ashes. It survived plague and fire to become what it is today, one of the world's most influential capitals. London is more than just a city. It is a symbol of endurance, freedom, and eternal rebirth.